Okay, so hi. For those watching this is a recording. Peter and myself, I started yesterday talking about sort of giving Peter some feedback on the Laos meeting from Wednesday, and we came to the conclusion it would be good to stop and make a recording of it so we could share it with other people. And so this is that recording. Okay, so let me start, and then we're going to do this as a dialogue because Peter will ask the question. We will have a conversation, and you can see why we're concerned, right? But so the thing that seems to have dramatically changed since I last had a deep involvement with Laos, which was the research and development meeting in Edinburgh in April, or I think it was April, that time, March-April time, is they've thrown away all of the idea of splitting it up, sharding it, so that you could have separate concurrent threads of activity. Okay, that's what they've done. And they've also thrown away things like input blocks and all the rest of it, and they've replaced it with this notion of EBs that are overflows from the basic Cardano block, what they're calling the RB. Right? So the ideal behavior of this system, and this is completely ideal, what happened in practice is the system's busy, it fills up the RB with its transactions, and then it has more left in its mempool. So then it fills up the EB, and the EB is not, because remember the RB is the whole transactions by value. The EB is effectively the transactions entirely by reference, i.e. it's just a pointer to them by their full-size transaction ID. Okay, and obviously they're much smaller, and therefore you can put more of them in there. And you issue this, and along comes the next block producer, and it's right, and it sees this previous block. It also sees this EB, and it has received greater than 75% yes vote of voting, saying that the contents of that EB, right, are approved by everybody. They're consistent, and therefore it sort of commits to the long-lived chain the previous RB plus the EB of the previous block producer. Still making sense? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it can then attach as an EB only any more transactions it wants.
Okay. Just one thing that's not clear to me is if the EB is a set of transaction IDs, how do the actual transactions themselves end up on the chain?
Well, as you build, my guess is, unless it's again, as you adopt, in order to adopt one of these RB-EB combinations, you have to have access to all of the transactions mentioned in the EB, because effectively, what is a blockchain? A blockchain is effectively, or at least is effectively the UTXO. The set of all UTXOs, right? So basically, you have to be able to build the UTXO set effectively. Forget about history for the moment. You have to build that snapshot. So, and they do sort of acknowledge that transaction diffusion is a potential weakness in this system, because currently you only have to ship blocks, right? With the Preos, if you ship a block, then you basically end up with all of the information necessary to apply that to your history. Now you've got a whole bunch of other mechanisms that have to also work, but they are saying that their basic estimate is that even if 75% of people weren't forwarding it, 25% is sufficient to form a mesh, which is true if it's random. But if it's not random, all better off, right? If the badness is randomly distributed and not, there's a whole. We'll touch on all the possible attacks that this opens up as we go on, but that's just one of the possible attacks, right, on it. Now, what I described here was, a sort of ideal sunny day, explaining. The point is, they are talking about of the order of 15 seconds. It's parameterized, but the numbers they've used for their samples seem to be 15 seconds. That the okay, you have to receive everything, and you have to receive the votes. That takes time. And what they're basically saying is, if the next block was produced before that was true, then the EB contents are ignored, and you just take the RB and build on top of it with an RB block with an extra in EB. So basically, you only
you'd expect everything that the EB was referring to no longer be valid.
Well, yes, so it's no longer valid, but it's
those
not.
Transactions have already been processed, and the UTXO has changed, and
Yeah. So point is, yes, you can't. So basically, this only works backward in time to the previous EB. And if a block is forged, if there is a forging event between you and that, right, then basically whereby this time hasn't expired, they basically the EB is discarded, and the EB is ignored, right? We'll come to why all of this makes me, all of this makes me shake my head in a minute. And then you basically, the assumption is, because they're maintaining a linear roll through this, you take the front of your mempool, put it into the RP, and then generate the rest of the EB afterwards. Okay. So, I must admit my blood ran cold when I actually understood this. And why? Okay, because you and I know, right, that in order for a system, an ideal system is one where you sort of have a 45-degree line in performance that goes flat at the top, right?
As you increase load, yes.
As you increase load. So basically, you add more load, you get more throughput, etc. Right?
Yes, until you reach the limiting capacity of the system.
And then,
in which case, the throughput remains constant regardless of load.
Yes,
that's what you want.
That's what you're saying, right? Now, the corollary of that is, in order to build such a system, if you want to make such a system work, you have to say that the cost of processing per transaction has to either remain the same or go down as the load goes up. Yeah. Basically, so the cost of processing a transaction at 10% utilization is the same as processing at 90% utilization, or less, right? The overall systemic costs, and the way that we worked on making sure that the current Cardano node works, we actually reduce certain costs as the load goes up, because we do things in slightly larger batches. We move transactions slightly big. So we, that issue of making the per unit cost monotonically decreasing, not necessarily strictly monotonically decreasing, but monotonically decreasing as the load goes up is a design that was
carefully thought about in the current design.
And it's throughout the code. It's throughout all the bits of the code where we had influence over. Yep. Okay. So they've now built something where they're throwing away work. They're doing work which is then discarded.
Potentially, yes. If this EB is not adopted, yeah.
Right. Now that's a sort of bad idea to start off with, but actually, it basically the more. Why is it? This is such a really bad idea, right? Because it means that you are systemically doing more work, and as the load goes up, you are the EBs get bigger. Even if you're just throwing away the same percentage of them.
Yes, the amount of work wasted is larger.
The amount of work wasted is larger, right? And the percentage you're going to throw away is dependent on. Well, no, actually, we'll come to that in a moment. So the point is, if you build systems like this, they no longer they no longer have that nice curve. They do this. They have a turning point in them.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, the cost is going up, so they can't. So the throughput, the effective
given finite resources, the amount of throughput will go down.
Or if you basically haven't hit that regime yet, things like delay will go up, right? Because you may have more resources you can pull in, but actually it's going to cost you more time to do it, or effort to do that. So basically, what you end up with is a system that basically whose behavior is actually chaotic, or its timing behavior is chaotic, depending on load. It ceases to be as predictable as you'd like it to be. Yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's two aspects to that. I mean, one is the undesirable consequence that as you push load up, you reach a maximum throughput, and then the throughput will drop off as you increase load.
And that's a given in this sort of design. Yes,
that's right. And then the other is what is the consequence on the timeliness of the system's outputs, and it doesn't necessarily follow that the delays increase, but it's very likely that they will in this design, because
the really interesting thing is the evidence for that undesirable behavior is in the SIP.
Right.
Okay. Right. This is what's really interesting is this flaw, which fundamental flaw, right, is going to cause these problems, and reasoning the problems are already happening in the SIP. And if you, I don't know if I show you some of the. I'll share something with you. Because when I read this, I couldn't work out why it was looking so bad. Let me just share this with you. And other people can go and read the SIP. Share window that. Yeah. So what you're seeing over here is these are different loading values, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is, the top ones up here are the sorts of ones you'd expect in a sort of standard system where there's a delay distribution deriving on a rival pattern, and then suddenly it flips modes.
Yes.
Right. And we're talking
presumably because we've moved into the regime where EBs are being created
and also discarded dramatically.
And discarded.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, just from an ergonomic, from an outside design point, this is a really bad idea, right? Because the timeliness I'm going to get is basically going to flip.
Well, and from
depending on load, and that's something I can't.
Which of course, as a user of the system, you don't know. So basically, it makes the timeliness unpredictable.
In a normal sort of system, you have some idea that the load will change a small amount, and the delay might change, so you can bound it.
Yes.
Right? But this one has a different mode of behavior. So when it flips, it flips. It doesn't change by a little bit; it changes by a large amount because it's changed. It's changed all the modes. Right?
Changed mode, yes.
So this is a huge disadvantage, because this means that dApps, which rely on effectively, typically a dApp is a sort of information or logistical problem where you put in something, you wait for it to happen in some extent, and then you rebuild on it, right? So it's a sort of cycle of behavior.
It's a cycle, yeah.
Yeah, and your profitability and your effectiveness is typically related to
how fast you can go around that cycle,
and actually your security models and your cost effectiveness is related to that. And if it's doing this, then basically the predictability and hence the apparent reliability of your dApp is now dramatically affected by this. So this strikes me that this is not good news for Cardano to produce something that will produce a system whereby as the load goes up, it suddenly becomes time. Once that's understood, why would people put dApps on this system? Right? Why would they? Because actually it's not predictable anymore. People accept load, right? They accept that there are error conditions under which the partition of the network. They'll accept that. This is designed in, right? It's a designed in property. That falls into the category of you should have known better. Built in. Okay. Now, they've also so that's one. That's sort of that's what possibly the major point here. But there are a couple of sort of other issues. So they talk about 15 seconds, right? But I mean the 15 seconds for the whole EB processing. So basically, 50% of events occur in 30 seconds. Sorry, in 13 seconds. So we're talking more than 50% of all of the EBs that are ever generated will be discarded, right? That's and as diffusion times go up, as if anything slows down.
So
right?
just to clarify the point you're making there, because the average interblock interval in Preos is 20 seconds.
Yep.
And it's exponentially distributed.
Yep.
It follows that 50% of the events, 50% of block productions occur within 13 seconds.
Yes. Basically, for exponentially distributed systems, the mean sits at when 60% of the probability of the events have occurred. At the 50% point, so the mean. So we're talking somewhere between 50 and 60% here of all of the EBs.
So you've got yes. So having had a block forging event occur at time 0, by the time you get to time 15 seconds, there's between a 50 and 60% chance that another block will have been formed,
and therefore your EB
the EB will be discarded.
Yes. And all the work you've done, and all the transmission you've done, and all the voting you've done.
All the voting and the voting, of course, is spread across the whole system.
Yeah. Well, the voting is not a one to the voting is a problem because votes can't be formed, collected as a semi-group. They basically have to be moved individually and collected together. You can't have sort of no one knows how to do that, right? How to band them together. So that's a big guys, for a certain amount of hardware, you're now going to spend all this extra effort and waste it more than 50% of the time to achieve something.
Yes.
This is sounding like a hard sell to the people running the SPOs.
Yes, that's right. And the further systemic problem is going to be because as you move into this regime where you're not just putting stuff in RBs, you're putting your surplus in EBs and then voting on them and so forth. All of that extra work that everybody then does delays other stuff that they do, right? Because so there's only a finite amount of processing going around.
It may be such that because it delays, and because these are all effectively triggered by van der Waals processes, they can't be scheduled. They cannot be scheduled to occur in the silent period of other objects.
Yes.
I mean, the point is,
you can't just do them when you were otherwise idle.
Yes,
you have to do them when it's time to do them.
Well, actually, you have to do them kindly, right? Yeah. And whether you were idle or not is another question, right? Anyway, so it's an evolutionary dead end. This is right because they've done this approach. It had an absolute finite limit of how it's going to scale. You still have to do the sharding out into something. They've basically the sharding is the way, splitting it into separate units that can be.
Yeah, concurrency is generally the way to get better performance.
Well, it's to get better opportunity to get better performance.
Yes,
this is shutting off all of those opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? So this is, as far as I can see, they may be able to reuse a bit of the code, but it's an evolutionary dead end, and they're going to have to throw it away and do something else next. Which is all of this. I mean, I must admit, this raises some questions of why the hell anybody did this, right? Because this is absolutely obvious. So I'd love to know who made this decision, because it brings into either it's getting to the point of competence versus conspiracy. I mean, it's a really good way of taking a lot of money and delivering something so that you can have to take a lot of money again to do something else, which is the conspiratorial view of this,
Yeah.
or it's just incompetence.
Yeah.
I really am at that end of the market, which is really,
Yeah. Whatever way around, it doesn't look good.
it doesn't look good, right? This also is extremely fragile for attacks. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, at the moment, and we'll do this and then stop because there's so many other things that are potentially, but this is a top level critique, right?
Yeah.
And people can say, oh, and we'll do a couple of things. One of the moments at the moment is there's nothing stopping somebody producing an empty block at the moment. Always producing empty blocks if they want to.
Yeah.
However, the cost to the system, it actually does something. It increases the chain length.
Yeah.
And it doesn't waste anybody else's work.
Yes. So it's useful work and it doesn't cause work to anybody else.
Producing an empty block here, which will still be valid. No RB, right? No EB vote, right? Or just not voting for the EB. Not only wastes work, it wastes work globally slightly, but actually it destroys it. It's now an ability to force the rest of the system to do work which is now deliberately wasted.
Yes.
Right. There's a whole, you know, I've been thinking a bit more about this as well. You know, given that you can see the RB and the EB, and you're a bit, you know, like this, you know, what's to stop me front running the stuff in the EB? Because basically I just ignore your EB if I get the vote, stick it in my RB, and I've won.
Yes.
So basically, this opens up whole new avenues of front running. Oh no, and basically I can see, you know, if I was you know,
basically everybody else in the system is wasting their time voting on the EB.
Yeah, and you're using that to turn around and get a march up on your DApp providers, and you know, I can see how to build that, right? This is not, and you're saying, oh, but that's evil, yes, right? But actually, it's what people do. It's exactly, you know, it's worth a lot of money to do that, right? And it's not that hard.
Yeah.
So, and that now it becomes, the ability to do it gets a lot bigger with this approach.
Yeah.
So basically,
and it's plausibly deniable.
Oh yes.
Because you can say, "No, I never saw the EB."
Yes, and that deniability plays into the problem of, well, you know, people say, "Oh, you're slashing, put up money and slash their money if they behave badly." You can't tell, right? And anyway, you know, that people say, "Oh, putting up a lot of money for staking and then slashing it," really isn't in the Cardano ethos. It'll stop people creating stake pools for a start. It also ties up more ADA. You know, and liquidity of ADA is a generic liquidity of any cryptocurrency is a problem anyway. It's a bad idea, full stop. So yeah, does that all sort of make sense? I mean, I'm not talking, you know,
yes,
there's details. I mean, to me, this is setting up a technically challenging to impossible problem. The timescale for delivering this is going to be, you know, if you deliver something that's half-assed, right? I don't know if that's acceptable in the wig world, but anyway, half-assed, so that it jumps into this secondary state and very, you know, and doesn't do it well, and all the rest of it, basically means that something that fails under load, you're producing something whose utility fails under load, and having more transaction throughput only to have the system not work reliably in some metric of reliability earlier is not going to be good for the general perception of Cardano.
No.
So anything else, or should we stop there?
I think we should probably stop there.
Right, but people who want to talk know where we are.
Indeed. Okay.
Cheers.
See you now.